Hey everybody, welcome to another video. My name's Steve, and if you're new to this channel, these videos are all about me sharing the ownership experience of my Porsches, and at the minute we are onto the new Porsche 718 Cayman GTS 4.0. Now this car arrived in October last year and I am now onto 3 months of ownership. The car is working fine, basically. I've done nothing really but commuter driving and a little bit of long distance driving to see some friends, but not enough to really say I've been doing anything other than urban driving, really. Nothing's fell off it, nothing's gone wrong, no recalls. I haven't had to go back to the dealership yet with anything, and I've done about 1,600 miles, getting close to 1,700 miles, so I have done a couple of MPG checks, and other than that, really, I've just been driving the car and trying to experience some of its features that are different to what I've owned on the other ones. So if you remember, I had a 2-litre version of this car. It was an ex-demonstrator, so I didn't get to spec that car, so it had no sports chrono. It was fairly basic spec. In terms of the 992 that I owned prior to this, I never put sports chrono on, I didn't put sports exhausts on, but it is basically a very similar performing car when it comes down to numbers and figures. I'll not go through them, I'll go in comparison in a different video, but I will sort of point out a couple of them just to tell you why I feel like this car drives a slightly different way. So since the last time you probably saw this car, it probably does look a little bit cleaner. I'm hoping that maybe the blue Dolomite silver is popping a little bit better than it did the last time under this light. It's going to be difficult to see that outside in the dark tonight, but we'll see if we can get out and get some lighter videos done as the summertime, springtime in the UK starts to kick in and the lighter nights start to come round. The wheels probably look a little bit cleaner than they did the last time that you saw them, although maybe not. The back ones probably still a little bit brown. Back probably a little bit dirtier than it should be, not that you can see in the light, but there you go, and there's another little quick walk around this car so you can see how it looks a little bit cleaner than what it did before. Now you'll know if you've watched the other videos, the previous car that I had to this one, which is what I sold and then ordered this to be able to change over, was the 992.1 Carrera 2, and that car was a 385 PS, this is 400. That car was a 3-litre twin turbo, and this is a 4-litre naturally aspirated, and obviously this car is not the standard spec, it is the GTS model, not just a standard Cayman. Now, okay, it's got different setups on, it's got slightly different bits and pieces on it to what I got with the 992 for the base spec on that car. I also didn't add the extras that come on here, which is the sports chrono, the sports exhaust. The standard wheels on the 992 were 19s on the front, 20 on the back. These are 20 front and back. I also have slightly different bumpers on this that probably, if you had a GTS 992, would be sort of very similar to these ones, very open in a slightly different, sportier, more aggressive style. The reason I'm bringing those points up is because really a lot of the difference between this car and the 992 that is coming to the forefront for me, having owned this and that car back to back, is the way that they drive. Now, there are differences in the sizes of these cars. Obviously you would expect it to be smaller. So particularly this car is actually 2 centimeters shorter in height from that to the roof. It is also 5 centimeters narrower, but we're talking with the wing mirrors folded. If you're comparing both car models, it is 5 centimeters narrower, and it is actually 10 centimeters shorter in length. Believe it or not, this car also has a slightly wider wheelbase than the 992. So if you park these cars side by side, maybe you wouldn't notice it as much, but the reason I'm pointing these things out is because I feel it does make a difference to the way these cars feel when I'm driving them, because also this car is a 2-seater with no backseat. The 992 or all 911 derivatives have the small 2+2 rear seat, and it does make the car feel more spacious inside. And in particular, I did feel that the 992 felt like a bigger car to drive. I did feel like I was driving a bigger car. It did feel a little bit less sporty to me, although I know that sounds strange and people might disagree with me, I don't know, but in terms of the actual drive, it did feel more GT-ish than it did sporty. So the point that I'm making in terms of how this car feels is that, as you can see, obviously within the interior, you only have a certain amount of room. Obviously you've got this sort of higher, larger dash into an area where in the 992 I had a longer, sort of flatter display area here, and I feel like this came in a little bit lower, so that this area in general felt a little bit wider. And obviously whenever you turn around and you look, that is what you're greeted with, because that is where the engine is, so you don't really have any space behind it to give you any extra space. So if I shut the door, it definitely does feel smaller in here. Even though I can't see behind me, I do feel more compact in here. I feel sportier, I feel, I don't know, more cocooned, where the 992 specifically, that model did feel bigger in here, bigger all around. The other thing that added to the feeling of sort of size to me in this car, especially on the rear end, which is possibly more of a psychological thing because it's not that much wider than this car, but when you look in the wing mirror, you had the wide rear body on a 992, which you don't really get in this. So if I show you on the wing mirror, you can see that sort of the rear wing obviously isn't as pronounced as the wide body is on the 992, and you get a slightly different sweep towards the rear of the roof on this car. So taking all of those things into account, including the physical size and the general overall feel inside here, this does to me feel and drive like a smaller car. I did feel like I was driving a bigger car in the 992, and at times it did make me feel like I was in something less sporty than what it was, although the performance, the PS is slightly lower, but it was the turbo car, so you got the same 4-second, because it's the PDK in here, the PDK in the C2, they were both 4 seconds 0 to 62, but for some reason this feels different. It's the 4-litre naturally aspirated, and I can feel the difference in the way that delivers the power. So I'm going to take this car for a little drive. I'm going to explain how I'm driving it as I go, so you can tell the difference in what modes that I'm in, and I'll drop the windows as well, take it down a back road, and hopefully we'll get a little bit of a sporty sound going, so you can maybe get the atmosphere in here without the road and wind noise being a little bit too over the top. Doing 30 miles an hour. It's probably not working the best in terms of light, but we are coming up to a stretch of national speed limit road. I'm going to put the car into sport. So there's sport. I don't know whether you can hear the change in direction. Now, you might, for people that have been interested in knowing what the lights are like in this car, these are the standard lights. I don't know whether you can see how they are picking up the edge of the road there. There is definitely the dip, so you can see it picking up more the left hand side or not. This is the 4 beams. So in terms of being able to see the road with the 4 beams, that is what it looks like. And if we're in 3rd gear at the moment, if I start to drop the hammer a little bit, you can probably get a note for what the engine sounds like. Windows down, I don't know how much wind noise we're going to get with it, but if I can bring them down, maybe you'll be able to hear more of the sports exhaust. So here's the windows down. See if we can get out of this corner with a bit of a straight. Unfortunately, if you're picking up wind noise there, obviously it starts to really pick up as the faster that we get. If I can get along this straight here, you might be able to hear a little bit more of it. Back up there. So really Sports Plus is obviously putting the suspension change on there, and it really does hold it in the gears for a longer period of time. So I don't know if that sound's coming through any stronger than what it was in just the sports mode, but if I drop it back down to just sport, that's taking me up a higher gear. I don't think it's made too much of a difference to the actual engine note in terms of the enjoyment of what you can hear coming through there. So just a random thing that I noticed about the Sports Chrono that I never really realised, never owned this car, 3 months now, never noticed, is that when you turn off the car but then you lock it, the stopwatch actually resets itself. So I'll show you what I mean. So right now it's telling me the time, it's obviously ticking away there. If I take the key out of the ignition, it still stays the same. Shut the door and I lock the car. How cool is that? So it resets itself, and then if I unlock the car when I first get in it, once I open the door, it resets itself again.